Good evening and welcome to Stories from the Shed, Danny the Champion of the World, Chapter 17. Now children, before we go and meet our characters normally today, I'd like to give, let's just remind ourselves who we've got. Danny's dad, Danny. But in the last chapter we read about Sergeant Samways. So are Danny and his dad going to get in trouble with Sergeant Samways for poaching 120 pheasants? We'll find out. Right, let's say hello. Evening, Rebel. We've got Doc Spencer down here with his evil henchman. We've got Mr. Victor Hazel, who breeds all those pheasants in the wood. We've got his gamekeeper. There he is, riding shotgun on the top of his car there. There he's got the. That's the man that he sent round to Danny's dad's petrol station to try and get it closed. Over here we've got Evening Pesco. Monkey's come back down from the shelf for us, and we've got Mr. Shoutout. Who's Mr. Shoutout going to shout out for today? Well, a shout out for Amna, who's been doing some super work at home. Amna from Year 3, and also we have a new fan. Miss Tate has been watching in. Okay, so let's get on with Chapter 17. Let's set the clock, and off we go. Right, so in Chapter 17, Danny was starting to learn that actually all the adults he knew and trusted, they were all in on this poaching thing as well. Even the village policeman, Sergeant Samways. Danny couldn't believe it. He said, "I was astounded, but I was also rather pleased because now I knew that the great Sergeant Samways was human like the rest of us. Perhaps I wouldn't be so scared of him in the future." Are you going to share them out tonight, Dad?" I asked. "Not tonight, Danny, no. You must always walk home empty-handed after a poaching trip. You can never be sure Mr. Rabbits or one of his gang isn't waiting for you by the front door to see if you're carrying anything." "Ah, but he's a crafty one, that Mr. Rabbits is," Charlie Kinch said. "The best thing is to pour a pound of sugar in the petrol tank of his car when he ain't looking. Then he can't ever come snooping round your house later on. We always made sure to give the keepers a little sugar in their tanks before we went out on a poach. I'm surprised you didn't bother to do that, William, especially on a big job like this one." "What does the sugar do?" I asked. "Blimey, it gums up the old ruddy works," Charlie Kinch said. "You've got to take the entire engine to pieces before it'll go again after it's had the sugar. Ain't that right, Willem?" "That's quite right, Charlie," my father said. "So what people would do, if you've ever got a car engine and you want to stop it working, one of the first things you can do is into the fuel put sugar. Okay, that's an old trick. So the poachers would put sugar in the cars of the gamekeepers so they couldn't go anywhere, so they couldn't chase them. We came off the bumpy track onto the main road, and Charlie Kinch got the old taxi into top gear and headed for the village. "Are you damping these birds at Mrs. Clipstone's place tonight?" he asked. "Yes," my father told him. "Drive straight to Mrs. Clipstone's." "Why Mrs. Clipstone's?" I asked. "What's she got to do with it?" "Mrs. Clipstone delivers everyone's pheasants," my father said. "Haven't I told you that?" "No, Dad, you haven't," I said, aghast. I was now more stunned, even rebel stunned. I was now more stunned than ever. Mrs. Grace Clipstone was the wife of the Reverend Lionel Clipstone, the local vicar, the man of the church. "Always choose a respectable woman to deliver your pheasants," my father announced. "That's correct, Charlie, isn't it?" "Mrs. Clipstone's a right smart lady," Charlie said. I could hardly believe what they were saying. It was beginning to look as though just about everybody in the entire district was in on this poaching lark. "The vicar is very fond of roasted pheasant for his dinner," my father said. "Who isn't?" Charlie Kinch said, and he started chuckling to himself all over again. We were driving through the village now, and the street lamps were lit, and the men were wandering home from the pubs all full of beer. I saw Mr. Snoddy, My headmaster, oh, do you remember him, children? Mr. Snoddy. He's the head teacher that has a bottle of gin in his head teacher's room. A bit wobbly on his feet and trying to let himself in secretly through the side door of his house. But what he didn't see was Mrs. Snoddy's sharp, frosty face sticking out of the upstairs window watching him. She's like the witch-like lady, isn't she, that's got 7 toes on each of her feet. You know something, Danny, my father said. We've done these birds a great kindness putting them to sleep in this nice, painless way. They'd have had a nasty time of it tomorrow if we hadn't got them first. Rotten shots most of them fellows are, Charlie Kinch said. At least half the birds finish up winged and wounded. The taxi turned left and swung in through the gates of the vicarage. There were no lights in on the house, and nobody met us. My father and I got out and dumped the pheasants in the coal shed at the rear. There they are, lifting all the pheasants out of the back of the car and putting them in the coal shed at the back of the vicar's house. Then we said goodbye to Charlie Kinch and began to walk the 2 miles back to the filling station. Chapter 18. Home. Soon we had left the village behind us and we were in open country. There was no one else in sight, just the 2 of us, my father and I, tired but happy, striding out along the curvy country road in the light of the moon. And here they are. I can't believe it, my father kept saying. I simply cannot believe we pulled it off. My heart's still thumping, I said. So is mine, but oh, Danny, he cried, laying a hand on my shoulder. Didn't we have a glorious time? We were walking right in the middle of the road as though it were a private driveway running through our country estate, and we were the lords of all we surveyed. Do you realise, Danny, my father said, that on this very night, on this Friday, the 30th of September, you and I have actually bagged 120 prime pheasants from Mr. Victor Hazel's wood? I looked at my father. His face was alight with happiness, and his arms were waving all over the place as he went prancing along the middle of the road with his funny iron foot going clink, clink, clink. Roasted pheasant, he cried out, addressing the moon and the entire countryside. The finest and most succulent dish on earth. I don't suppose you've ever eaten roasted pheasants, have you, Danny? Never, I said. You wait, he cried. You just wait till you taste it. It has an unbelievable flavour. It's sheer magic. Does it have to be roasted, Dad? Of course it has to be roasted. You don't ever boil a young bird. Why do you ask that? Well, I was wondering, Dad, how we would do the roasting. I said, don't you have to have an oven or something? Of course, he said. Dad, we don't have an oven. All we've got is a paraffin burner. I know, he said, and that is why, Danny, I have decided to buy an oven. Buy one? I cried. Yes, Danny. With such a great and glorious stock of pheasants on our hands, it is important that we have the proper equipment. Therefore, we shall go back into the village tomorrow and we shall buy an electric oven. We can get one at Wheeler's. And we'll put it in the workshop. We've got plenty of electric plugs in the workshop. Won't it be very expensive? No expense is too great for roasted pheasant, my father announced superbly. And don't forget, Danny, before we put the bird in the oven, we have to lay strips of fat bacon across the breast to keep it nice and juicy. Oh, children, roasted pheasant with my mouth is watering already. Roasted pheasant with bits of bacon put across the top. It's almost like Christmas dinner. Oh. And we'll find out tomorrow how they get on with preparing for the pheasants. And I wonder how they're going to share all the pheasants out. This is the thing we don't know. And I tell you, they have quite an interesting method. And also, at some point, Mr. Victor Hazel's going to find something out, isn't he? Just for now, shall we see how Captain Lancaster's getting on? Let's see how he's getting on. There he is. Oh, he's still stuck to the web. Well, what about the spider's nest? Let's look up there. Oh no, we're still waiting for Captain Lancaster's death by 1,000 spiders.